The morning I found out, I was standing in our kitchen in bare feet, holding a mug of coffee that had already gone cold. Brandon was in the shower. I could hear the water running. I could hear him humming, actually humming, like a man without a single secret in the world. I wasn't snooping. I want to be clear about that. I had never needed to snoop before. But his phone had lit up on the counter, face up, and the name on the screen was one I'd never seen. Not a coworker, not a client, just a name, a woman's name, and beneath it, 4 words that didn't belong in my marriage. I miss you already. I stood there for a moment that felt longer than it was. Something shifted in my chest. Not quite pain yet. More like the sensation of a floor dropping away. Something doesn't add up here. That was my first thought. Not anger, not grief. Just. Something is wrong with the shape of my life, and I don't yet know how wrong. Then I did something that would turn out to be the most important decision of my life. I took a photo of the screen with my own phone, set his face down exactly as I'd found it, and walked back to the bedroom to get dressed. Composed, quiet, already watching. What I didn't know yet, what I couldn't have imagined standing there in my bare feet, was that the affair was the smallest part of what he'd done, to me. By the time I sat down at my desk that morning and pulled up our joint savings account, the one we'd been building for 11 years, the one earmarked for our daughter's college, for the house renovation, for the retirement we kept promising ourselves, the balance made my vision blur. $43,800. Gone. Not stolen by a stranger. Transferred methodically over the course of 19 months, in amounts small enough to avoid automatic fraud alerts, to an account I had never seen. My husband had not just given another woman his heart, he had given her my money. Let me tell you who I was before that morning, because it matters. My name is Lauren. I'm 44 years old. I spent 17 years in this marriage building something I believed in. A home, a family, a financial foundation that required real sacrifice from both of us. I drove a 7-year-old car. I packed lunches. I said no to vacations we couldn't afford. I believed Brandon and I were in the same story. We weren't even in the same book. Brandon was, a financial advisor. The irony of that sentence still makes my jaw tighten. He understood compound interest, tax shelters, and account structures better than almost anyone I knew. Apparently, he also understood exactly how to move money quietly, and he had been doing it for a very long time. Our daughter, Savannah, was 16. She thought her father hung the moon. Every Sunday morning, he made her pancakes in the shape of stars. He coached her soccer team when she was 9. He walked her to school on the first day of every grade until she told him, at 12, that she was old enough to walk alone. I thought about Savannah while I sat at my desk that morning, staring at a balance that should have read $112,000. I thought about her college fund, about the conversation I was eventually going to have with her, about the kind of man her father really was. But I pushed that thought down deep, because I couldn't afford to fall apart. Not yet. Instead, I called my friend Brenda. She's a forensic accountant. Not a close friend the way a college roommate is close. More the kind of friendship built on mutual respect and the occasional glass of wine at a conference. But she was exactly the right person for what I needed. I told her I thought my husband might have been moving money. I gave her nothing else. She said, "Send me 6 months of statements." I said, "I'll send you 36. There was a pause. Then, "Lauren, how bad is it?" I looked at the number on my screen. "I don't know yet," I said. "That's why I'm calling you." Have you ever trusted someone completely, and then realized the trust itself was the trap? Drop a Hess if you've been there. Over the next 5 days, I lived 2 lives simultaneously. In the first life, I was a wife. I cooked dinner. I watched television beside my husband on the couch. I said goodnight. I did not flinch when he kissed my cheek, and I will admit that required more from me than anything I have ever done. In the second life, I was building a file. Brenda moved fast. By day 3, she had mapped 19 months of transfers, always between $200 and $900, always on Fridays, always to a savings account held at a credit union in a city 40 minutes from ours. The account was in Brandon's name alone, a personal account he'd opened 6 months before the transfers began. The destination of that money, a wire transfer, once a month, to a limited liability company. The LLC's registered address was a UPS store, and the LLC's listed manager was a woman named Nicole Harmon. I wrote that name down. I said it out loud once, in my car, alone. Then I got to work. A public records search told me Nicole Harmon, age 38, was a licensed interior designer with a business called Harmon Creative, polished, curated, and built, in part, with my money. By day 5, Brenda had identified 31 separate transfers totaling $43,000, $820. She also found something else, something that made even her, a woman who spent her career wading through financial fraud, go quiet on the phone. "Lauren," she said slowly, "I'm looking at your retirement account." I closed my eyes. He moved a beneficiary designation 3 years ago, without a spousal consent form, which means either the institution processed it incorrectly, or someone forged your signature. I opened my eyes. Who's the new beneficiary? Another pause. The limited liability company. He hadn't just stolen our savings. He had been quietly rewriting our entire financial future. That was the moment I understood the scale of what I was dealing with. This was not a man who had made one terrible impulsive choice. This was a man who had been planning, methodically, patiently, over years, to hollow out the life we had built together and redirect it toward another woman. And he had done it while making pancakes in the shape of stars on Sunday mornings. I remember sitting very still for a long time after that call. Then I picked up my phone and searched for a family law attorney. Not the first one on the list. The second. A woman named Rebecca Holt, who had a specialty I hadn't known I needed until that moment. Financial misconduct in divorce proceedings. I made an appointment for Thursday. I told Brandon I had a dentist appointment. He said, "Don't let them upsell you on the whitening." I smiled. I said I wouldn't. The week between finding out and my meeting with Rebecca was the longest of my life. I learned things I hadn't expected to learn, not about Brandon, but about myself. I learned that I could feel two completely opposite emotions at the same time with perfect clarity. Grief and focus, rage and patience, love for the life I thought I had, absolute zero tolerance for the man who had destroyed it. I also learned that doing nothing, strategically, is the hardest thing in the world. Brandon had no idea I knew, and I needed to keep it that way, for reasons that were about to become very complicated. Rebecca Holt's office was on the 14th floor of a building downtown. She had the kind of quiet authority that makes you feel like things will be handled. I laid out everything. The transfers, the LLC, the beneficiary change, the photograph of his phone. She listened without interrupting, took notes in a small, precise hand, and when I finished, she leaned back and looked at me. "You're going to need a forensic accountant's certified report, a private investigator for the affair itself, and a freeze on any joint accounts you still have access to that he doesn't know you flagged." "I have the forensic accountant," I said. "The report is already in progress." Something shifted in her expression, respect maybe, or recognition. "Good," she said. "Most women come to me 2 weeks after confrontation, when everything's already been moved or deleted. You came to me before." "I needed to know what I was dealing with first," I said. "What you're dealing with," she said carefully, "may include wire fraud. Forging your signature on a financial document is a federal offense. I'm not telling you to pursue that route. I'm telling you to be aware of it, because it changes his calculus considerably once he knows you know." She paused. "Do you want him to know yet?" I thought about it for exactly 1 second. "No," I said, "not yet." I drove home from that meeting thinking about something Rebecca had said, that forging a signature on a financial document was a federal offense, which meant Brandon hadn't just been deceitful. He had been willing to commit a crime, and if he'd done it once, I needed to know if he'd done it anywhere else. The next 2 weeks, I moved with the kind of precision that surprises people who've only ever seen grief make a person small. I documented everything. I opened a private bank account in my name alone and began redirecting my direct deposit. I photographed every financial document in our home office, tax returns, investment statements, insurance policies, and stored them in a cloud account Brandon didn't know existed. And then, something happened that I genuinely did not expect. Someone knocked on my door. It was a Tuesday evening in October. Brandon was at what he claimed was a client dinner. Savannah was at soccer practice. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of water and a spreadsheet when the doorbell rang. The man on my porch was about 50, dark suit, measured posture. The kind of stillness that belongs to someone who has learned to wait. He said, "Mrs. Hargrove, my name is Derek Harmon. I believe you and I need to talk." I said nothing for 3 full seconds. Then I opened the door wider and said, "Come in." Derek Harmon was Nicole's husband. We sat across from each other at my kitchen table, 2 people in the same situation, from opposite sides of the same wound. He was a civil engineer, calm, not angry in the way I might have expected. More like a man who had done his own version of what I'd been doing, quietly gathering facts before making a move. He had known about the affair for 3 weeks. He had found it the way I had, by accident, then by investigation. But he had found something I hadn't. something that made my already complicated situation significantly more so. Your husband didn't just fund Nicole's business, he said. He slid a folder across the table. He's a co-investor in it, a silent partner. They incorporated together 18 months ago. His name is in the operating agreement. I opened the folder. I looked at the document. Brandon's name was there, in clean legal typeface next to Nicole's. I sat with that for a moment. My hands were steady, but something behind my sternum went very, very still. He hadn't just been having an affair. He had been building a life with her, using mine as the foundation. He hadn't just been stealing from our marriage. He had been building something with her, a whole parallel financial life, using our money as the seed funding. Derek watched me process this. I've already spoken to my attorney, he said. Nicole received marital funds from your household without your knowledge or consent. That may create liability on her end as well as your husband's. What is it you're proposing, I asked. Not a proposal, he said. An alignment of interests. You're pursuing your husband. I'm pursuing my wife. There's information I have that strengthens your case. There's information you have, the forensic accounting, that strengthens mine. I'm suggesting we share it. I looked at this man, a stranger, technically, who had appeared on my porch to offer me something that felt, against all odds, like help. Why should I trust you? I said. It wasn't hostile. It was practical. He nodded, like that was exactly the right question. Because I want the same thing you want, accountability. And because I'm the one who came to you, not the other way around. I have nothing to gain by lying. I thought about it for a long moment. Give me 48 hours, I said. What would you have done in my position? Trust a stranger, or go it alone? Tell me in the comments. In those 48 hours, I did not sleep much. I called Brenda first. I told her about Derek Harmon, the operating agreement, the LLC. She went quiet in that way she has when her brain is moving faster than her voice. The beneficiary change on your retirement account, she said finally. I've been digging on the spousal consent form, Lauren. I found a copy the institution processed. The signature on it is not a match for yours on any other document in their system. How certain are you? Certain enough to put it in a certified report, which means it goes from a civil matter to a criminal one, the moment your attorney decides to use it. Someone had forged my signature. The question was whether Brandon had done it himself, or whether Nicole, the woman whose business depended on this money, had helped him. I called Rebecca. She told me what I already suspected, that a forged financial document creates potential criminal exposure for both parties involved. She told me to share Brenda's findings with Derek Harmon's attorney through proper legal channels, not directly between us, to keep everything clean and admissible. And the affair itself, I asked, documented how? Photograph of a text message. Brenda's financial trail showing 19 months of transfers to a joint account they appear to have shared access to. I'll have an investigator on it by end of week, Rebecca said. 2 weeks of surveillance, and we'll have what we need for discovery. I thought of Brandon, humming in the shower. 2 weeks is fine, I said. I've waited this long. The investigator, a woman in her 40s named Donna, who looked like someone's favorite librarian and moved with the efficiency of a surgeon, had what she needed in 11 days. Hotel records, photographs from public spaces, a credit card statement linking Brandon to dinners, short stays, and a lease deposit on a workspace for Harmon Creative. All charged to a corporate account I had never been listed on. A card that had been open for 4 years. He had been building his exit, quietly, carefully, for 4 years. If you enjoy stories about betrayal, resilience, and justice, subscribe now. The biggest twist is still ahead, and you do not want to miss it. By the time I had everything I needed, 6 weeks had passed since the morning I'd found out. 6 weeks of sleeping in the same bed as a man I was building a legal case against. 6 weeks of Sunday pancakes and school pickups and asking how his day was. 6 weeks of watching him lie to my face while I quietly dismantled every advantage he thought he had. I want to be honest with you. I was not okay during those 6 weeks. But I was functional, and I was strategic, and I had made a decision early on, in those first hours, before I'd said a single word, that I would not act until I was ready. Not until the case was airtight. Not until the accounts were secured. Not until I had protected Savannah's financial future as much as the law would allow. Because here is what I understood that Brandon did not. Reacting from pain gives the other person power. Responding from preparation gives it back to you. He had built his plan over 4 years. I had built mine in 6 weeks. Efficiency matters. The day I was ready, I did 3 things. But the night before, I almost didn't make it. Brandon came home that Tuesday evening quieter than usual. He stood in the kitchen for a long moment, looking at me with an expression I couldn't read. Then he said, "Are you doing okay? You seem distant." Every muscle in my body went still. Does he know? Has something leaked? Did someone see me going into Rebecca's building? "Just tired," I said. I smiled at him. He nodded and walked away. He didn't know, he was just asking, but I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I was up at 5, and by 9 o'clock, I was ready. First, I had Rebecca file for divorce. The filing included the full forensic accounting report, the investigator's documentation, the operating agreement naming Brandon as a silent partner in Harmon Creative, and a formal allegation of marital waste, the legal term for when a spouse dissipates marital assets for non-marital purposes. Second, I notified our bank that I was disputing the beneficiary change on the retirement account and provided the signature analysis Brenda had commissioned from a certified document examiner. Third, I called Brandon at 2:30 in the afternoon on a Wednesday, when I knew he'd be at the office, when I knew Savannah would be in school, when there would be no ambient chaos to hide in. And I said, very calmly, "Brandon, you've been served. I'd recommend calling an attorney this afternoon." Then I hung up. He called back 7 times in the following 11 minutes. I did not answer. I had said what needed to be said. There was nothing else to discuss, at least, not between us, not then, not without our attorneys present. What I didn't know, what nobody knew yet, was what Nicole Harmon was about to do when she found out that both her husband and I had been building cases against her simultaneously. Derek and I had coordinated through our attorneys, exactly as Rebecca had advised. The alignment of our cases created a picture far more complete than either of us could have assembled alone. Brandon's transfers to the LLC, Nicole's knowledge of their origin, the operating agreement, the forged document. Derek Harmon, it turned out, had his own forensic accountant and his own evidence that Nicole had moved $112,000 from their joint accounts over the same period, her share of the scheme, or her own parallel version of it, or both. 2 households, 2 victims, 1 coordinated trap, and neither Brandon nor Nicole had seen it coming. Brandon moved out the Friday after he was served. He took clothes, his personal laptop, and approximately 16% of the leverage he thought he had, which turned out to be considerably less than he'd imagined. His attorney was good. I'll give Brandon that. He didn't come at me with someone inadequate. But the problem with coming to a fight with a good attorney is that it still requires having a defensible position. Brandon didn't have one. Rebecca was better, and the evidence was overwhelming. The divorce discovery process is, in normal circumstances, tedious. In our case, it was a detailed unraveling of a 4-year financial deception, and each deposition, each document request, each line item that Brenda had cataloged became part of a record that Brandon could not explain away. He tried. In one deposition, he described the transfers as personal loans. Rebecca produced 11 months of evidence that no repayments had ever been made, and that the loan, if that's what it was, had been made without my knowledge or consent from joint marital funds. In another, he claimed the beneficiary change had been discussed between us. Rebecca produced 3 financial advisors who had met with us jointly and confirmed that no such change had ever been mentioned in their presence. The forged signature was the turning point. When Brandon's attorney saw the certified document examiner's report, he went quiet for a very long time. A forged signature on a retirement account beneficiary form. That is not a mistake, that is a crime. I watched Brandon's face when Rebecca presented it in mediation. He was sitting across a conference table from me. The first time I'd seen him in person since he moved out. He looked older, thinner. He had the expression of a man who had finally understood the dimensions of the trap he'd built for himself. He did not look at me. I looked at him steadily the way I had been practicing, not with anger, not with satisfaction, just with complete, undeniable clarity. What Brandon didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that at the same hour his attorney was going. Quiet over the document examiner's report, Nicole was sitting across a conference table from Derek's attorney, facing the same evidence from the other direction, the same timeline, the same transfers, the same forged signature. 2 cases, coordinated to the day, landing simultaneously. Nicole, I was told later, had asked for a recess. She had left the room for 17 minutes. When she came back, she had a different expression on her face. She finally understood that there was no version of this she could win. It was, Rebecca told me afterward, one of the cleaner, strategic executions she'd seen in a case of this complexity. I thought about the morning, 6 weeks earlier, when I'd stood in my kitchen in bare feet with a cold mug of coffee. I had come a long way from that morning. and I still had further to go. Did you see this twist coming? Drop your reaction in the comments. The settlement negotiation took 3 months. Brandon, faced with the forged document and what Rebecca gently explained was a credible path toward criminal referral, agreed to terms that were frankly more generous to me than a courtroom might have produced. Full return of the dissipated marital assets, including the $43,800, with interest. His share of the marital home, a corrected beneficiary designation on the retirement account, and a provision added at Rebecca's insistence that required disclosure of the secret corporate account and any residual assets held within it. There were more assets there than either of us had known. 3 months after the settlement finalized, my phone buzzed with a text from a former colleague who still ran in the same professional circles as Brandon. 4 words. Harmon Creative is gone. I read it twice, set down my coffee, sat with it for a moment. Good. I won't pretend that wasn't satisfying. The LLC had been structured in a way that required both partners' signatures to continue operating. When Nicole's divorce finalized and Derek reclaimed his portion of the marital funds she'd contributed, the business could no longer sustain itself. The thing Brandon had built with my money, the parallel life, the exit strategy, the future he'd been quietly constructing while I packed lunches and drove a 7-year-old car. It was gone. The forged signature was referred to the district attorney's office. I was told the investigation could take a year or more, and that outcomes in financial fraud cases are never guaranteed. I accepted that. I had not built my case around criminal justice. I had built it around financial recovery and personal dignity. The criminal referral was a consequence of the evidence, not the goal. The goal was always the same: to get back what was mine, protect my daughter's future, and walk out of that marriage without being made smaller by it. Brandon did not go to prison. I want to be honest about that, because stories like this sometimes imply a more cinematic outcome than the one that actually arrives. He negotiated a civil resolution to the fraud allegation and paid a significant fine. His securities license was placed under a compliance review that effectively ended his career as it had existed. Nicole fared similarly. Derek's case established that she had knowingly received funds she had reason to believe were improperly obtained from a marital estate. She settled. She lost the business. She lost the house she and Derek had owned together. She started over. Somewhere else, apparently, though I don't track her movements. Savannah found out about her father's affair 4 months after the divorce filing, when a mutual acquaintance said something careless in front of her. I told her the rest, carefully, in age-appropriate terms, so that she didn't have to piece it together from fragments. It was the hardest conversation I have ever had, she cried. I held her. She asked if I was going to be okay. I said yes, and for the first time in months, I meant it simply, without calculation. She asked me one more thing in a very small voice. Mom, how did you stay so calm? I thought about it. Because, I said, staying calm was the only weapon I had that he didn't know about. She nodded. She thought about that for a moment. Then she said, that's actually kind of badass, Mom. I laughed for the first time in a very long time. I live alone now, in a smaller house that I chose entirely for myself. The light in the kitchen, the garden in the back, the fact that every object in it belongs to me and reflects something true about who I am. Savannah is a freshman in college this year. Her tuition is paid. Her future is intact. That was what mattered most. I think about what I learned in those 6 weeks of gathering evidence while my world was quietly burning. I think about the version of me who might have confronted Brandon that first morning, screamed, thrown things, demanded explanations he wasn't going to give honestly. That version of me would have lost everything. The version of me who waited, who watched, who documented, who planned, walked away whole. If you have ever been underestimated by someone who should have known better, if you have ever swallowed your reaction because your strategy mattered more than your anger, then you already know what I know. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is wait, watch, build, and then, when the moment is exactly right, show them who you actually were the whole time. If you've ever been underestimated and found a way to rise above it, subscribe. More stories of betrayal, resilience, and justice are coming. Was the punishment fair? Tell me in the comments. What do you think was the biggest mistake Brandon made? Drop it below. Would you have handled it differently? I want to know.